Good morning. This is the IHC Reading Club with Hans Mattingly. I'm your host, and our guest today is Dr. Mark Leon. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Mark.
Well, thank you for having me.
Dr. Mark is the professor of philosophy here at IHC, and the book that he's brought for us to talk about a little bit this week is called Appearance and Reality, a Metaphysical Essay. By F.H. Bradley, and I haven't had the chance to read this book, but maybe it can kind of be a launching point for some discussions about philosophy and your approach to teaching philosophy at IHC and some of the particular challenges and rewards of teaching that subject here. So why don't you go ahead and get us started here. Who is F.H. Bradley and tell me about his book.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to. So now, first of all, I would like to note the size of this book, and it's called an essay. Now, in my philosophy class, students will be writing essays. Do not fear, your essays will not be quite this long.
Just a little bit shorter.
Right? A little bit shorter. Now, the author, I don't know if you can see the name here, if you can zoom in here, this F.H. Bradley, at one time very well known philosopher in England and the UK. And in the United States, not so much in Europe, as he was English and not a continental philosopher. But can we sum up what he's trying to get at in this rather long essay? Would that be possible to do in the space of a short conversation here with Dr. Mattingly? What do you think?
Well, I'd sure like to give it a try. I mean, what you've said so far is already interesting because most people who study philosophy at the college level will know that there's philosophy, according to some schools is a European, and certainly was taken up very seriously in modern school systems in Europe, or much, long before the modern era. But eventually this kind of division that people talk about quite frequently came about, whereby, as you said, there's continental philosophy, and then
European,
European continental,
yes.
and then the philosophy of Britain, which kind of gives rise to analytical philosophy, right? So there's these real,
correct,
these real
absolutely.
But this is a British philosopher writing in very continental terms, isn't he?
Well, not so much, but not analytical either. I would say he's probably closer to the analytical tradition. But
Okay.
But this guy Bradley is one of what was at one time known as the British idealists.
Okay, I've not heard much of them.
Yeah, well, they're not so big anymore, but at one time, towards the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, they had a lot of influence. More famous British idealist philosopher, maybe possibly the first one that you probably have heard of, is a guy named Bishop Berkeley, as it was pronounced in England.
Okay. Well, we know the name Berkeley around here to a certain degree, don't we?
It's pronounced Berkeley in the United States. So, and the University of California at Berkeley was named for this guy. So
Well, I assume the town was, because the town is
yes,
Berkeley. Right?
and the college. Now, the story of how that happened, I don't know exactly. So that's Google it. That's a research project. That's a homework assignment. No, just kidding. Anyway, but this Berkeley, as we pronounce it in the United States, he was a British idealist. Now, he's the guy. Okay, a very famous philosophical question. You're probably familiar with this one, right? If a tree falls in the middle of a forest,
right? Yeah.
And you can finish it from
and no one is around to hear it. Does it actually make a sound?
Okay, that's Berkeley was the guy who really kicked off that sort of. Now that question had been around for a while, but he put it in sort of new terms. His point, and the reason he was called an idealist, this guy's following in his tradition is that, now note again the title of the book, Appearance
Well,
and Reality.
I mean, that's what I think we should pause just for a minute there, because I mean that it seems like almost a childish or kind of trivial question, right? Because it seems the answer is almost obvious, right? Well, things don't depend on, but that's the exact question, right? Is something like sound, right? Well, the conditions for sound are there because there are air waves and everything moving, right? But isn't sound actually also a function of its perception, right?
Exactly.
Which provides a link to another series of philosophical questions.
The question there being, what is anything really? What is the relationship between appearance, what we see, what we touch, and reality? Now, most of us, the obvious answer is, well, I know what reality is. This is real. But, okay, if I hit this thing much harder, it's going to hurt, right? So, it's real. But what is it really?
Right, and also is just this one instantiation of this thing being real? Well, at what point does some kind of collection of those things being real constitute something called reality, right? Which kind of has a lot to do with the way that we label things and the way that we talk about things, right? Reality is an abstract thing in the way that a cup isn't.
Except, yes and no. Now you're getting into sort of more of a modern, almost continental view of philosophy, where you're bringing in language and linguistics, I think, a bit.
Yeah, you're right.
And
I'll defer here to the expert.
this guy, see, he's coming before a lot of that stuff, and he's trying to take a really hard line following.
Now that's what's amazing. Look at this. I think that actually, if you take those linguistic terms later on, people like Wittgenstein follow that, right? Or Fernandez, right? I think they'll arrive at answers like the ones that I was about to give you, right? That reality is, by virtue of its grammatical concept, is different from a cup, right? But as Professor Mark was saying, that insight hadn't yet come around. And so this is somebody who is making an attempt, an essay, to try to figure out the answer to that question without our modern answers. And this is the attempt that he makes. He takes it to a full 600 pages.
Yeah, it's, now to his credit, it's, I think the first maybe third or quarter is the part titled Appearance. So he spends a lot more time with reality. But, okay, let's get back to why he's called an idealist in the tradition of Berkeley.
Okay.
Because his point, one of the points he's making here, is that no matter how hard you try, if you want to try to say that reality is something outside of your mind, outside of your perception, outside of the ideas that you have, you will fail. You will hit a mass of contradictions that can't possibly be fixed logically or philosophically. So he, again, following in the steps of Berkeley, says the only thing that's real are the ideas in the mind. Now, we get into some very difficult questions there. Whose mind? My mind? Your mind? How do we know? Now, they have various answers. Berkeley's answer was, okay, we can fix all that. We just say, ultimately, it's the mind of God. Now, he was a bishop, right? An Anglican bishop. Bradley does something similar. He makes a move very early in this book. He says, okay, there is this thing which we will just call it the absolute. And he spends, yes.
I want to interject because I feel like we're starting in on a lecture which is not meant to be the content of our meeting today. But it sounds like a fascinating lecture, and it certainly says a lot to me about British idealism, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of my own education. But if you would like to hear the follow-ups to this, you can stop by the IHC study hall. You can come in and meet Dr. Mark on campus, and I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you at greater length about this, and maybe you'll consider enrolling in one of his courses. So,
with that said, come to see us at IHC.
yeah, come see us at IHC, and thanks for being with us this morning. Thanks.